Detmer, and I am the Director for Strategic Partnerships at the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. Very excited to be doing this summit with you today, along with my colleagues, Haley Cushion and Jill Farrington. Haley is going to be your tech support today. So she'll put her information in the chat and how you can get a hold of her. So any tech questions you have, if you could just message her either through here or email, that would be fabulous. Jill will be presenting a big portion of today, so you'll be meeting her in a bit. I just wanted to say how pleased we are to be a part of this event with you and talk through a little bit about how today will run. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about kind of the past efforts that have happened around peer support in Nebraska. And then we're going to talk about what other places are doing nationally, so you can get a bigger picture of peer support on a national level. And then we're going to have a discussion, and that's where we really want people to participate in thinking about what the future of peer support will be. So I just want to lay just a couple of ground rules. It's really challenging when we have this many people. It's great to have this many people, but it's also creates challenge in terms of discussion. And so what we're hoping is that while we're doing the presentations for the first 2 hours, if you could be off camera and on mute. And if you are not, we will go ahead and mute you, so don't be offended. It's just us trying to manage the whole picture here so that we have good sound quality and all of that. So if you see yourself going on mute, it might be that we muted you.
Oh, you're getting the other eye done. Okay, good. That's a good idea.
And then, Haley, I don't seem to have the ability to actually mute. So maybe we can work on that. But anyway.
And I can assist with that too.
Okay, great. Thank you. I also wanted to say that today's focus is really about the future of peer support in Nebraska. So even though we'll talk about what's happened in the past, Carrie Bennett will be doing that. That's good context as we start to think about what do you want peer support to look like in the future. And again, just because we have a lot of people, and I know 3 hours seems like a long time, but it's really not in the grand scheme of things. So I will be doing a little bit of management, and I really just want people not to be offended if I cut you off. It's just meant to keep us moving in the right direction. So if we go down rabbit trails, which I know we can all do, I'll probably be bringing you back to focus. So I might interrupt you and just say, we can put that in a parking lot for another meeting. But for today, we're going to focus on what is the future of peer support in Nebraska. So just know that. And again, I hope that you don't find that offensive, but it is the best way we can think to manage a big crowd. So we appreciate your patience with that. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should mention. Once again, if you could be sure your cameras are off, if you're off mute, or excuse me, on mute, and if you have any technical issues, Haley Cushion, she has Haley Cushion tech support next to her name in the little box there. You can chat her and she'll help you out as much as she can. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Carrie.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks very much. And good morning, everybody. I'm really tickled too to see so many people joining us this morning. We had over 100 folks that were registered, and we're pretty close to that number of attendees. So that's fantastic and encouraging to me. I'm Carrie Bennett. I work for Nebraska VR, Nebraska Vocational Rehabilitation. And my whole job is centered on brain injury. And I manage our programs and services within VR around brain injury, but then I also manage our federal traumatic brain injury grant that we get from the Administration for Community Living. And what we're talking about today are some efforts that we fund and are looking to fund further into the future that come from our traumatic brain injury grant from the Administration for Community Living. So, but before I start my short presentation, I want to acknowledge some guests that we have in the audience today, and just to thank those folks for their support of all things brain injury, and particularly of the TBI grant activities. So when I say your name, if you want to just put hi, hello in the chat, that would be great, so folks can know who you are. Judy Nicholson is chair of our Brain Injury Advisory Council, and I know she's in the audience today, and she'll also be, excuse me, she'll also be speaking later on. She'll be interviewed. And Tiffany Armstrong is our vice chair of our Brain Injury Advisory Council, and we're excited to have her in attendance today as well. I'm sure we have a lot of the other council members too, so if you are a council member and want to just throw your name in the chat and say hi to everyone that's here today, I would appreciate that. Tobias Orr is the director for our Assistive Technology Partnership program in the state, and he is very supportive of peer support, has been a really great ally and collaborator on getting this summit put together today. So I just wanted to say hello to him. Nancy Noha also works for Assistive Technology Partnership, and she does some part-time work for us on the TBI grant activities. So want Nancy to say hi. And finally, Teresa Christensen is also a great staff member that works with me on administrative support for the grant activities. And I know Teresa is in another state this morning, but I think she's also joined us from the great state of Wyoming. So just want her to say hello to everybody too. So I think I'm ready to go, Judy. Thank you. Just a little bit of background. Nebraska really has a great legacy of dedicated local support groups that dates back to the late 1980s and early 90s, and probably even before that. I showed up in the late 80s to begin my job with Nebraska VR, and I know here in the Kearney area, we started a support group in about, I'm going to say 1988 or 1989, and there may have already been support groups in existence well before that, but that was the first that I knew of a support group starting. And I just want to say a couple of words about our support groups across the state, because I think we have some support group leaders that have joined us today. I just really want to recognize and honor the dedicated local support group folks, the leaders and the attendees of those support groups, and to really assure folks that today's presentations and discussions are not intended in any way to discount or replace the great work that our support groups do. We're committed to really moving forward with peer support in a strong way for people with brain injury and their family members, and in ways that honor and support and elevate the work that our support group leaders and members do. So just kind of wanted to make those personal notes and assure folks that we really want the support groups to survive and thrive as we move forward. Nebraska VR and the Brain Injury Advisory Council, we did some sustainability planning with a consultant in 2016, and that work resulted in a recommendation to build the voice of Nebraskans with brain injury. And that's really where our interest in building peer support started, was in those conversations. Pilot funding was included in our federal traumatic brain injury grant application for 2018 to 2021, which is the past grant cycle. We also included goals to increase the availability of evidence-based peer-to-peer supports for individuals with TBI and their families in our 2021 through 2026 TBI grant, which is our current one that we're working on right now, and also in Nebraska's Living with Brain Injury State Plan. So we want to demonstrate our support for building peer support in our official work that we do under the grant. So next slide, thank you. The pilot that I want to give you a little bit more information about this morning was funded by Nebraska VR, again with TBI grant funds, as I mentioned before. We made it a competitive, we put out an RFP for competition and chose a primary contractor for the pilot. That was the Nebraska Injured Brain Network, or NIBN. The pilot rolled out in about 3 phases from November 2020 through April 2022. And we actually had started our new grant in that period, but we had no cost extension funds from our previous grant. Because of COVID and a lot of other things that happened, we were a little bit late getting started with the pilot, but we were able to use previous grant funds for that. For the pilot, NIBN also received some technical assistance provided by NASHA, your wonderful hosts for the summit today, and a volunteer consultant. And what I really want to stress as part of my short presentation here is that the Injured Brain Peer Support pilot really resulted in some positive outcomes for the individuals who were involved. So next slide. So phase 1 planning, the RFP asked for a really detailed plan of action that we could review and see that it would be headed in a good direction that was consistent with what our values and principles were for the work. A team of 6 individuals with brain injury worked with the consultant to formulate the plan from NIBN. The planning phase included a review of past survey results, old needs assessments, more current needs assessments. They did some first-person interviews, had a lot of team dialogue, did a literature review, analyzed data, and really assessed the readiness of potential participants from across the state, and kind of assess the readiness of our systems and support services to be able to handle this. The results of the planning phase were that the underlying philosophy of the recovery journey, peer support definition, process, injured brain peer supporter role, and principles for interaction. They also did created outlines for tools and activities under that phase 1 planning. And that occurred from about November 2020 through March 2021. During that phase, they also defined what peer support means or was going to mean to folks in the pilot. They defined peer support as a process that seeks to engage a peer, which is an individual with brain injury, with an injured brain peer supporter for the purpose of assisting the peer to identify if they have any vulnerabilities that keep them from understanding, defining, and pursuing the recovery journey of which they are capable. So very person-centered, very oriented toward the individual who is seeking the assistance of a peer supporter. Sort of underneath that definition, activities were to support the peer to address those vulnerabilities to the extent they're capable, kind of the underlying philosophy there. And then the peer supporter would work alongside the peer to pursue the recovery journey path that the peer defines for themselves. So it would be walking alongside, not necessarily leading or following, but walking alongside of the peer. Next slide. In phase 2, NIBN began their ramp up toward launch. They tested and adapted the plans and outlines that they created in phase 1. Accomplishments under phase 2 included hiring a project manager, drafting discovery tools and a job description, which are very important, creating policies, protocols, marketing materials, the training curriculum, and then recording some training sessions for those folks that stepped up and wanted to be peer supporters. But there were a lot of barriers to encounter, bless their hearts. You know, the years of 2020 through even the last year have been very difficult for all of us due to COVID, economic issues. There are just a lot of things going on. So they did encounter some barriers, and several peers who had been involved became unavailable because of their own personal health issues, family issues, you know, lots of reasons. And it became really difficult to identify and recruit peers to participate. And of course, as I mentioned, COVID-19 pandemic forced virtual versus in-person training sessions. We were really hopeful that the pandemic would have been fading by the time the peer support pilot launched, but as we know, it didn't fade, didn't go away. And so really we were forced to do more virtual activities than were originally planned. This phase lasted from April 21 through November 21. Next slide. So when NIBIN implemented, they kind of did a left turn, if you will, or developed a new goal based on those barriers, which I think, you know, if anyone encounters barriers, the best thing to do is figure out a way to go over, under, or around that barrier. They developed a new goal, which was to meet peers where they are, take that kind of approach, and introduce the peer support curriculum and tools to as many peers and family members and caregivers as possible, shifting away from that traditional program approach where the program matches people with, matches trained peers with folks that need peer support, to more of a group effort, more of a global kind of approach. So they worked with naturally occurring pairs or groups that identified that, hey, we want to be involved and watch the curriculum and be trained in how to provide peer support for ourselves and for each other. So some of the participants represented in the pilot were a married couple from the central part of the state, a couple of local brain injury support group members, a mother and a sister pair, and then siblings who lived in different states also were involved in watching the videos and then having discussions between the two of them about those videos. Next slide. So yeah, all of the participants watched the videos and then progressed at their own pace. Some folks were able to complete the entire curriculum of videos. Some didn't get that far, but the videos still exist. There were group discussions twice per month in the evening via Zoom for anyone that could join. 21 peers or individuals with brain injury, 6 family members or caregivers participated overall for a total of 27 participants. And between all of those folks, over 620 hours of time were spent watching the videos, discussing, and you know, having interactions about the material that they were exposed to. 8 Nebraska counties were represented and 1 other state, the 2 siblings that worked with each other. We conducted some formal evaluations of the training materials in particular. And then NIBIN and the private consultant did some informal evaluations among the pilot members, pilot participants themselves. And the implementation phase was rather short, really, November 2021 through April 2022. Next slide. Just a little bit more detail about the participants, so you kind of know, who was involved. 17 peers were aged 22 to 59. 4 peers were aged 60 and over, and 1 peer was a veteran. 6 were working competitively, and 3 were in school or training. Most folks lived on their own or with family members. 4 family members were aged 22 to 59. 2 family members were age 60 or over. And as I mentioned before, most folks lived in the central or western Nebraska counties. We collect this data for our federal funders at ACL. And so I thought that would be interesting data for you to know about the participants. Next slide. And this is the best part. Here are some quotes from that informal evaluation that was conducted between NIBIN and the private consultant and also the participants. And I'll just read these for you. Not that you can't read them yourselves, but I think it's very powerful to read these quotes. One person said, "This training has made my relationships with my friends and family better in terms of communicating about my traumatic brain injury." Another person said, "It's changed how I look at myself in a life-altering way. I lost my sense of value after my injury. This reminded me I have worth, and how I allow others to treat me is on me. If I see no worth in myself, how can I expect them to see worth in me? Next slide. Couple more quotes from participants. It reminded me of how many things my kids did for me, and so I sent each of them a thank you. It has affected my relationship with my kids positively. And another person said, I appreciated how the videos were set up so I could pause them and answer the questions and interact with the people in the video in my own way. I was able to laugh along with the discussion in the videos and identify with others. It made me feel included and supported, that's what we want, right? And the last quote that we have, I received so much more from this experience than I will ever be able to give back. You can't describe finding some value in yourself when you've completely lost that. And I think that really, to me, is the essence of peer support. It's the essence of what we want to carry forward. And we want to see so many more people in Nebraska that experience brain injury or who are impacted by brain injury as a family member to be able to say something similar to this. So next slide. General conclusions that came from the pilot were very positive. People valued the opportunity to be engaged in building a community. The customized curriculum can really be adapted to be more inclusive. One, not complaint, but one comment was included in the informal evaluations that everything was really centered on the individual with brain injury themselves. Not much curriculum pertained directly to family members or caregivers. And so that would be something that we want to note and carry forward to be more inclusive of family members. Individuals express statements of joy often during the trainings. They also learned something new about themselves, formed new relationships, and strengthened existing ones, like with their kids or their wives or their husbands or their significant others. Peers and family members would really like to continue with the program. And ultimately, we determined, and the participants and we in VR and the Brain Injury Advisory Council determined that the peer-to-peer support is really worth expanding and supporting. So next slide. This is just to acknowledge our federal funders, and we're always grateful to ACL for the grant funds that we receive. Nebraska has competed very well for many years to get these funds, so we want to acknowledge our funders. And I think the last slide that I have is my contact information, and you are always welcome, anyone's always welcome to reach out to me, however it works best for you. And I also wanted to include our Brain Injury Advisory Council website there. There's a lot of really good information about Nebraska VR's work under the grant and the Brain Injury Advisory Council, how it operates, and great background information for what we've accomplished in Nebraska with our grant funds. So I look forward to hearing Jill's presentation coming up after the break. And you'll learn more about what's going on in other states, I believe, around peer support. And then we'll have a great discussion toward the end of the session this morning. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Judy.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
We have decided we'll hold off on a break. Jill will get started, and then we'll take a break midway through her presentation, since we're a little ahead of time, which is great. So with that, Jill, if you don't mind, I will get your slides set up. Now we got them.
Good. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Actually, hello, fellow Nebraskans. I am a resident of Colorado, but I grew up in Bellevue, Nebraska, was there on and off during my childhood and then throughout my middle school, high school, and part of my college years. So I feel like Nebraska's home, and I'm happy to be with you all today as a fellow Nebraskan. We are going to shift now into just some learning about other models, other states' practices, so that the last portion of the day can be very rich with interesting information about what's possible because it's happening in other states. I'm going to be, this is just a brief agenda of my portion. We're going to really start with just some basics about peer support. This will be a review for some of you that are already pretty familiar with peer support, but we'll start there. We're going to then take some time for a really important part of the day, which is to hear from some peers about their experiences during the pilot. Then we'll go more into the national landscape of brain injury peer support and look at peer programs by state. And then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about some different program considerations, the things that states think about when they're building a peer program. And since you all are post-pilot now, it's a great opportunity just to review, again, what some of the variations are around the country. Some of the topics that we talk about today are perhaps going to be a little bit more on the technical side, and if those topics were of interest, they could require more fact-finding, more research or consultation. For the most part, this is really an overview to get everyone thinking about how peer support might fit in Nebraska going forward, as Carrie said. I'm really happy to be here, and I'll go ahead and get started. So I thought we would begin with some definitions. You heard the pilot definition earlier from Carrie, and so these are in addition, these are other ways that peer support has been defined. And the first one is that peer support is a system of giving and receiving help founded on principles of respect, shared responsibility, and mutual agreement of what is helpful. And when I see those words mutual agreement, it really helps me to remember how person-centered peer support is and is meant to be, so that no one's directing, but there's side-by-side work with peer support. There's another definition that comes from a woman named Sherry Mead. And Sherry Mead is an author, and she is the creator of a program called Intentional Peer Support. She started New Hampshire's first peer-run crisis respite, which meant that it just wasn't a clinical focused respite setting. And she's trained nationally and internationally. So she defines peer support as when people find affiliation with others whom they feel are like them, they feel a connection. This connection or affiliation is a deep, holistic understanding based on mutual experience where people are able to be with each other without the constraints of traditional expert-patient relationships. Again, this was adapted from a quote that Sherry Mead uses on her website, which is referenced here. Really enjoy the clarity of this next definition. And sorry about that. It is peer support is the process of offering support and assistance in order to improve well-being and adjustment. Peer supporters offer emotional support through listening and sharing knowledge and experience, teaching skills and connecting with people with resources, opportunities, and communities of support. And then I enjoy the sort of real nice summary in the red font at the lower part of the screen, which is a peer has personal knowledge of what it's like to live and thrive with a brain injury. So that just gets us thinking a little bit about peer support and the ways that, regardless of the actual definition used or what you all will define for going forward in Nebraska, is that there's this focus on well-being, and wanted to provide those definitions for us to get started. It's also helpful, I think, to talk about generally what peer support isn't. And some of these could probably be picked apart just a little bit, but in general, what we see from states is that they are clear that peer supporters are not therapists. They're not advice givers, because that tends to pull away from the person-centeredness of peer support. They're not legal advisors. And of course, they're not romantic partners. They're not respite caregivers, financial supporters. And it's definitely thought that we wouldn't want to see a peer program where there's expectations that the peer will do things for the peer, like help with moving or paperwork, something like a professional organizer might do. These mostly just serve as caution areas because you could probably imagine that any of these patterns could inadvertently or unintentionally kind of start going down the path of any of these. And they're just reminders as the program gets shaped about the importance of being really clear about what peer support is and what it's not. So now we'll take another look from this general aspect of where support got started. And I thought that it was interesting when I first learned that peer support technically began over 200 years ago. There was an administrator of a hospital in Paris named Jean-Baptiste de Poussin, and I practiced that pronunciation last night. And what he did is that he hired patients who had already recovered to assist in the care of patients that were still undergoing treatment. So even back then in 1793, he was de-emphasizing solely the clinical model and really holding up how important peer work can be. So there's a letter that he wrote and kind of nicely summarized how he perceived the importance of peer support in the letter that he prepared for Philippe Pinel. So now we'll talk just a little bit about what's been said about peer services and supports. And these findings come from the field of psychiatry in a 2012 published paper. So this is not necessarily research, but back in 2012, what was held up strongly is that there is hope through positive self-disclosure. And I think when we heard Carrie's quotes at the end of her session today, we definitely heard about that same aspect. That hope, in addition, we know that from this paper that modeling function to include self-care of one's illness is an important part of peer support. It helps individuals explore new ways of managing their brain injury. And in summary, the paper talked about the relationship of peer support is characterized by trust, acceptance, understanding, and the use of empathy. So wanted to spend just a second here just to acknowledge really that there are these different definitions that are out there. And sometimes they're used interchangeably. Sometimes they there's a lot more clarity around the differentiations, but it's important to think as the program's going forward, how you all will continue or newly define your peer programming or peer approach. So I listed here what we see in the other states. We definitely see the term peer support, and we see peer-to-peer support. So again, just sort of another phrase of it. We see peer supporter, which is technically the one who is assisted, who is assisting another peer. And then we see this term peer mentor. And I wanted to just suggest, and this is for Nebraska to conclude, but peer mentors, as I read it, can sometimes be a little bit more associated with one-way support. If you consider like the term of a mentor, and that a mentor sometimes has a protege, you know, they may be giving advice. They may be helping an individual learn to network in a new field. So while the peer mentor is squarely used in other programs in different states as the term for what we're talking about today, it's just a thought that you all went down the road in the pilot of not utilizing that terminology, and it feels like there may be a good reason not to. The last term is the one that Carrie spent some time on acknowledging in Nebraska, and that's support groups. And what I only wanted to say about support groups is, like Carrie did, that how important they are and the value that comes from participating in a support group. and that it's not what we're here to talk about today. So we want to have clarity about this more one-to-one support versus the support groups. There's another term that I didn't include here, but it's an interesting one that you all may think of or see come up in the future, and that is a near peer. And a near peer is a peer who is close in age to the person that they are providing support to. So you might think about a college campus and how an individual with a disability might be matched up with a junior when they're an incoming freshman to get the kinds of supports that they need on a college campus. That would potentially be a near peer kind of a category. So now let's talk just a little bit about the evidence or what has been seen as the benefits of peer approaches. There was a study in Australia, the Netherlands, the UK, and the United States that looked at peer support, and they managed the analysis through doing interviews with individuals, not unlike the way that Carrie mentioned earlier. They had measures of well-being or tools or assessments that helped look at individuals' burnout, their job satisfaction at different intervals. So they did those measures at 4 months, and then I believe 12 months and 24 months. It's sort of a cadence like that. And what they found absolutely in that study was that the peers felt valued and empowered and connected. Some of the specifics that came out of that were that there were improvements to community integration and quality of life. And then an interesting piece that came out of that particular study with those 4 countries is that it was noted that it was more important, individuals felt, to be matched with someone based on having a similar experience, perhaps an injury-related challenge and impact. That was more important in that study than being matched with individuals by, say, age or gender. So another takeaway as shaping of this program gets underway. Finally, as we talk about about the evidence and what we've seen from other studies, is a little bit of a look at the behavioral health system, because they've got a pretty long track record of providing peer support. So some of the studies have indicated on the left side some challenges with peer support that need to be top of mind when preparing or implementing or administering a program. And then on the right are some of the successful approaches to intervene and to make and turn into solutions. So on the left side, in the behavioral health peer arena, there have been some challenges with peers feeling a pressure to be a pioneer in a new role. So it's very exciting when a new program comes around in a state, and that pressure of needing to feel that everything is successfully running, may be something to manage and be aware of. Another challenge is negotiating identity issues with existing professionals. So when we think about the behavioral health system, a lot of times peers are potentially working side by side with other clinical staff. They may be attending staffings and getting advice from existing professional staff. And so sometimes that can set up some identity issues or perhaps lack of confidence. And so approaching that through training and looking at adjusting the approach to help individuals think through or prepare for that is of value. And then the third one is that it can be a challenge to navigate the unfamiliar issues around information sharing, boundaries, and professionalism. And this to me seems to speak to having some level of pretty strong structure for everyone involved to know what is okay and what's out of bounds, so that there's a lot of ways to mitigate some of these concerns. But on the right side, what we'll talk about are the ways that this has been adjusted in the behavioral health workforce. Clear job descriptions. Again, that structured written guidance that individuals can refer back to and that training can be connected to. The role of specific training and support. So really understanding the importance of starting individuals in that prepared way with training and support, as Nebraska did in the pilot and continued to do throughout, and is now, looking at those options. Another strategy for managing some of the concerns that came up were preparing for the clinical teams working alongside peers. And so again, that support of managing when peers need to work side by side with maybe a clinical social worker or a psychiatrist or a licensed professional counselor. And then the last one that was mentioned here was the shared expectations of the peer role. So at this point, we'll move into talking a little bit more about some interesting models that are around the country and the varied approaches that we've been seeing and hearing about. We'll go more state by state in a little while, but we want to start now by just talking more broadly about the model. Judy. Oh. I
Nope,
just saw you pop
I
back on.
apologize. Go ahead, Jill.
Nope, you are good. So in a minute, we'll talk more state by state, but now we're just going to talk generally about models. So you're going to hear them come up again. So the first model or approach that we wanted to prepare and talk about is the volunteer approach versus the paid approach. With paid approaches, it's possible to require more it's very possible to require more investment in training and program fidelity meaning that everyone does the approach the same way, and making it allows more opportunity to indicate to peers that there needs to be paperwork in on time. There may be more specificity in a paid peer position about the duration of the engagement. It's because the program, as we're going to talk about in a few more minutes, is likely a little bit more formal on the paid side. There actually may be a little bit less oversight, which is an interesting dichotomy in some ways. But when you think about it, if you have paid peer supporters, you may have fewer of them, and they're being matched to multiple peers because they're working 20 hours a week or 40 hours a week. So they have a caseload in some ways that they then are matched to multiple peers, and there may be a little bit less opportunity for that, that support and oversight. Easier to match if you have a peer supporter that has a great breadth of awareness about the multiple aspects of disability. So when a paid peer supporter is recruited and hired, training or bringing in individuals that really have that experience from past work or background can then help with matching. And then there's opportunity to really set what you think need to be the qualifications and the skill sets, what kind of training is expected, and elevated, heightened or elevated expectations around training. Maybe that means that individuals get initial training and then they get refresher training. So those are the kinds of characteristics we see with a paid peer supporter. Generally, more structure, more requirements. Under the volunteer side, which you're going to hear about in a little bit, is the major way we see peer support offered around the country. This taps into the heart of volunteerism and the passion to be of service. Again, I'm reflecting on the statements that were made within the quotes that Carrie shared. And how it gave back to the individuals that were serving as peers to be in that role. Typically, you'd see some lighter requirements around training. Sometimes we see that this may be, a half-day training compared to something a lot more formal. And we'll talk about those training differences more so as we go through the morning. So in the behavioral health arena, as we mentioned, that has had quite a bit of peer support experience, we do see that there's more paid peers. In the brain injury arena, an area, we actually see that that is not the case. There's a noticeable number of volunteer sites over and above the number of paid sites. And we'll break that down in a little while. So next we'll talk about that more formal structure to peer support versus a less formal or informal approach to peer support. In a formal program, these are the kinds of things that you might see. You might see a longer term commitment to providing peer support. Sometimes we see generally like a year of support recommended for adults, sometimes longer for youth. Potentially fuller impact, potentially, on confidence, self-esteem, attitudinal shifts, and behavioral shifts, in large part, perhaps because of that longer term engagement, that longer commitment of working together. There's also, in a formal program, more heightened screening, more heightened training, oftentimes administrative oversight, and program expectations and supervision. Compared to the informal program, the informal is kind of flagged there on the right side of the screen. Programs that are running, and there are a number of them that are running more informally, oftentimes require less time or engagement between peers. There may be less or sometimes no money involved, and fewer organizational requirements. These kinds of arrangements are more short-term, and there's lower administrative oversight. And if there is oversight, maybe it's through a volunteer. Training is still really necessary and is required in the programs that we see, even if they are informal. And matching, there's some really unique ways that matching is done, and that could be through posting peer options online and allowing for individuals to establish their preferences through that information that is available to them on the web. It could, though, be through some staff experience with potential peer supporter. The ideal setting it's been said for informal is more so programs like we'll talk about in a few minutes, which are when people are transitioning from the hospital or rehabilitation settings to home. This is that's oftentimes a less formal approach to peer services. So when there's settings for inpatient or transition from hospital to home, again, we're seeing that flag of more informal peer programming. The next item is family to family. And I heard Carrie mention earlier that one of the takeaways of the pilot was to really take families into the greater and more consideration. And I heard also that there were family members involved with the pilot, but that it is a goal to be inclusive in this area. So we wanted to add a slide for family to family, where those families are receiving education, information, and the support of others who've had that similar experience to achieve hope, guidance, advocacy, and camaraderie, and help individuals find their coping skills and resources. With the peer supporter programming for family to family, perhaps it could be even more important to have this offering for families whose loved ones have had a moderate or a severe brain injury, that perhaps an individual may not be able or want to be a peer themselves due to that extent, but their families could very much benefit. And thinking about ways to see this happen in Nebraska is, I think it sounds like, of quite a bit of interest. While there's not many of them, there are faith-based programs. And in a faith-based peer program, you certainly could see elements of the following. There may be prayer involved. There may be Bible reading or short worship sessions. And where we've seen the faith-based program that in particular that I'm remembering and thinking about is in a private not-for-profit that was able to raise funds, and the philosophy and the real focus of that particular program has started and has stayed faith-based over the years. That takes us to something we mentioned a minute ago, and that's hospital to home. So when I say hospital to home, I also think rehab to home, certainly. But in a hospital to home peer program, which there are many of them around the country, and then there's some that are focused on brain injury. There's some that are focused on brain injury and spinal cord injury, or just spinal cord injury, and many others above that. But in a hospital to home program, the individuals are typically matched before they're discharged, and they get support with questions. They get help with building their confidence, thinking about next steps, definitely assisting with that transition back to the community or home. These programs, as I mentioned earlier, do tend to be informal. And so sometimes what that means is there's not a lot of data that's collected, so that a state might wonder, like, how many contacts got made in our hospital to home peer support program last year? In some programs that may or may not be as much of the emphasis, which is okay. And it's also just a consideration, because if it's important to collect data to demonstrate that a program is achieving outcomes, then that may be something that you want to incorporate. And then my last slide before we take a break and then come back together and do our interview with the peers themselves. I'm going to go over this last slide, and it's about behavioral health collaborations. So you heard me say earlier that there's been a much longer history of peer support in the behavioral health system. You heard me say that there are more paid peers in the behavioral health system. So how are peer programs for behavioral health and brain injury coming together? So one example is in North Dakota. So you're a neighbor up to the north. And that is taking a look at the ability to get payment to a peer through a Medicaid specialized program. I want to stop there and just talk briefly about what that is. States have waiver programs. Many of you on this session have heard of the brain injury waiver in Nebraska. And states have these waiver programs under an umbrella called home and community-based services that allows people that have extensive needs to not have to live in institutional settings, but instead can thrive and live in community settings and in the homes that they choose. Now, some of the waiver programs have taken a little bit of a different turn, and they say, we want to provide services to people with complex needs, but they may not be individuals who would, if they didn't get that Medicaid service, be in an institution, which is typically the threshold. And so a program called 1915I, which is just a waiver authority, is utilized in North Dakota. And it allows individuals who may not be as significantly impaired, they may not actually need institutional level of care, but they can still get attached to a waiver program. So this 1915I waiver in North Dakota isn't specific to brain injury, but they have figured out a way to incorporate brain injury as a population with or without behavioral health. And that statement's really critical, I think, because a lot of times there's programs that are addressing the needs of people with co-occurring behavioral health and brain injury, and then there may be some peer specialist funding because an individual is getting support from the behavioral health system. But what was so unique in North Dakota, and it might actually be the only program in the country, is that if I am a person with a significant brain injury in North Dakota and I meet all of the qualifications, I don't have to have that behavioral health condition. So they've opened up the door in a much wider way for people with brain injuries to get peer supports. They did that just recently. And it took them, I was reading, about 1.5 years to pull it off. They had to start with getting a lot of public input. It was submitted to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services in April of 2020, so right after COVID started. And then it was approved several months later in January of 2021. So it's really a relatively new program. There's still a lot being learned in North Dakota about this model. And it's one that I think we all have our eye on to see, how it works and how that might be able to be replicated in other states. Then there are programs different than what I've talked about and described in North Dakota that say, okay, we don't have a standalone brain injury program. However, what we all know is that there are a lot of individuals that have brain injury and a behavioral health condition. That might be mental illness, it might be a substance use disorder. And because that overlap is so significant, a lot of studies say 50% of individuals with a behavioral health condition will flag positive for having a brain injury in their past. That's significant. And so in some states, the collaboration has been, we want to train our peer supporters that work with the behavioral health system to be very brain injury informed in their approaches, because they're likely working with people with brain injuries. That could go as far as getting peers or possibly the other behavioral health colleagues to screen for brain injury. But if not screening for brain injury, absolutely providing services in a brain injury informed way that makes sure that individuals more often than not can be successful with that experience. So we'll talk a little bit more about a program where that's been done pretty extensively over the last few years, and that's in Maryland between their behavioral health system and their TBI lead state agency.
We're excited for this next section here where we'll hear some perspectives on peer support from people who have been a part of peer support. With that, I am going to turn it back to Jill to moderate this next section.
Thanks, Judy. All right, I invite Shauna and Trina along with Judy to Nicholson to come off camera. I am very excited about this next section and doing these interviews because as I've had opportunity to talk with these 3 women, I know that they've had some really different and valued experiences doing the pilot. And so we've shaped a few areas for some discussion today to increase the interaction. So it looks like we've got Shauna with us and just checking, and Trina. Great. All right, we're going to start with you, Shauna, and just go through a couple questions each. All right, we're going to start with Shauna. And Shauna, I was wondering if you could please talk about what you thought peer support might be like before you went through the training and understood the model further.
Well, I think since in my previous life, I had been a nurse. And so I think a lot of people think that peer support's going to be more like a mentorship. And you're going to come in and they're going to sweep in like Superman, I guess. And they're going to help you answer all the questions that you have. And they're going to have already been through this, and they're going to be able to answer all your questions. And they're going to be able to, they've already done this, been there, done that, and answer everything for you. But that's not how it is. People don't need to come in and answer everything for us. We need to learn how to do that ourselves. We need to build that self-confidence that we've lost and rebuild that value in ourselves. And we don't need somebody to have all the answers. We need somebody to walk alongside us and understand that our brain is a puzzle, and that puzzle goes together differently now. And so just because the puzzle pieces look different, maybe we have to learn to put them together a little differently. And we have to learn a different way to do that. But we don't have to have somebody do the puzzle for us. We just have to have them maybe show us that it has to be done differently. So rather than having somebody do the puzzle, we need to have somebody help us understand that it needs to be done different. And I think that so many people think they can just come in and do the puzzle. So doing that training, we learned that we can't do everybody's puzzle.
So it sounds like when we talked, when there was the presentation earlier hit on how there is maybe less importance of a peer doing advice giving, that sounds like that resonated with you, that you as somebody receiving peer support would not be looking for somebody to give you advice.
It's not advice so much as you just need somebody to say, you know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to trust yourself again. I have a whole bunch of shirts that say, I'm damaged, not dumb. And I made those specifically to remind myself and remind the people around me that I might be damaged. I am a person living with a brain injury, but I'm still a person and I still have value. And I might be a different person, but I still have value that I can give to the community. I still have value that I can give to the people around me. That value just expresses itself differently. And I think a lot of people want to come in and take over and do for us. And that's not what we need to support ourselves or learn to trust ourselves again.
Thank you. So are there any other misconceptions, Shauna, that you feel people with brain injuries in Nebraska might have that you would want to shed light on beyond what you've already covered so well?
I think a lot of people don't understand that you actually have a brain injury. They look at us and they see this normal looking person. I mean, people look at me and they don't understand that I even have a brain injury. So if you see somebody that's normal looking and you don't understand, when I'm standing there looking confused at you, just be kind to me. Understand that I'm struggling. Being kind takes 99% of the struggles out of the world. You just need to be kind. You just need to understand that most of us, you are not going to be able to look at and know that we have a brain injury. We are the invisibly injured on this planet. So if we are acting different or we are looking at you strangely, you have to learn how to understand that. And so that's one of the things that I had to learn, how to interact with other people. And until you have a peer that can explain that to you and say, okay, when this person is acting like this, how are you going to react to that? Because our emotions are also like on a short fuse, and immediately you want to get mad and say, well, they're stupid. They don't why can't they figure it out? Well, we have to be the one that learns to re-interact with the public and educate the people all around us that we are walking among them. We live in their communities, and there are so many of us that they don't even know are here. They have no idea. They have no idea that we live among them, we work among them. They stand next to us at the grocery store. So just be kind to us. If I can't count my change at the grocery store, just be kind to me.
Mhm.
Just be kind.
Nicely said. I'm just recognizing Carla's statement in the chat too. Such a reminder to honor the reciprocity in relationships. We must all be able to give of ourselves in relationships. Thank you for speaking so effectively on the invisibility of this, and that invisibility carries over to this topic that we're talking about today in peer support. Thank you so much, Shauna.
You are so welcome. I'm going to hand the iPad over to Miss Judy.
Great. And we're going to go to Trina while you're doing that. So there's plenty of time. And Trina, looking forward to talking with you about your experience. And the first question is to please share an experience you had during peer support that you feel represents the power of this approach.
Thank you for having us today. I think the power of the peer support approach is the idea that peers are supporting other peers, individuals with similar experiences who've walked in their shoes. As a parent, I often say that though our son's brain injury symptoms began 15 years ago, I don't understand what people living with an injured brain are really experiencing. Talking with others who are living with an injured brain helps me understand what we are experiencing is similar to others who are living with an injured brain. Being involved in this process and developing those relationships, making acquaintances while attending the peer support training, brain injury support group meetings, those sorts of things have validated that we're not in this alone. It provides a group to connect with who have an understanding of what we're going through. And I'm sorry, I script a little bit because I do a better job of talking than. I appreciate one of the ideas that was shared in the peer support training, the idea of living with an injured brain rather than the term brain injury. In our family's experience, like Shauna was talking about, because brain injury can be an invisible disability, people who haven't lived with brain injury, even sometimes medical or academic educational professionals, seem to assume that a brain injury heals and reverts back to normal like other injuries. The concept that people are on a recovery journey from the effects of their brain injury for the rest of their life is so much more accurate. The brain doesn't heal like a broken bone that is set and cast and then back to normal within a few months. Because time has passed since the brain injury event, even maybe 15 or 20 years, shouldn't indicate to other people that this injury is in the past and you just need to get over it. Having a support system like the peer support groups and the peer-to-peer pilot that we worked on helps provide that support system of people who understand this important concept about living with an injured brain. And that's the value I see in the support of the peer-to-peer system.
Thank you so much. Would also love it if you would share a quality of life improvement that you feel has a connection to the peer support that you have received.
So as I said, I'm a parent rather than a person living with an injured brain. So I have a little different perspective than Shauna or Judy. I've read a lot of articles through the years, done a lot of research. Some of what I find really interesting is just across all humanity, the idea that social connectedness is considered to be a human need and essential for even our health. So a person living with an injured brain or a family member or caregiver can tend to feel socially isolated. Friends that you had prior to your brain injury, maybe even family members, may no longer connect with you. The person living with an injured brain can have some disabilities that affect how they function in life. As a family member, you can also experience that isolation because people don't understand the life changes that a brain injury causes. Without a support group of individuals who have similar experiences and understanding, we often feel very alone, like we are the only ones experiencing this life. The quality of life improvement with the peer support for me as a parent of a person living with an injured brain involves gaining some new and better understanding of brain injury. Peer support training shares insights that help me to relate better. I can also say that I have felt heard, understood, and accepted by others in the peer support system, and empowered to move forward because of the personal experiences and knowledge that these other people share. Having a support system of people living with an injured brain can improve that quality of life for both the individuals living with the brain injury and their family members or caregiver systems. I also want to say that I appreciate all the information shared here today. Many things in today's presentation so far make me feel validated in my understanding of what our experiences have been. And they also give me food for thought on how we can maybe move forward and look at some other angles. So I really appreciate being included today.
Thank you so much, Trina. You spurred nice comments in the chat that are interesting to read. And there was a recent one on other suggested terminology for the injured brain. And I think it was specifically, living after brain injury. So I think that sends home the message that there really are different ideas and approaches for how to phrase and message the important work that's done. And the most important thing is that the work is being done and the work is being shaped. So with that, we're going to move to the third individual for some perspectives, and that is Judy Nicholson. So hello, Judy.
Hello.
Wanted to see if you would talk about a quality of life issue you experienced before peer support and how that changed after receiving peer support.
Okay, I can do that.
Thanks.
I'm a registered nurse, and Shauna is also a registered nurse. And when I had my injury, I was so discounted as a person and as a nurse. All I received was like comments from doctors and stuff that I needed to quit embarrassing myself, that I had too much education to have a brain injury, that I knew too many of the signs and symptoms, and so I could tell them I had these things. And so I basically, as a registered nurse, I had to start my own journey on my own recovery journey, because I knew that I needed more and I needed more help. And I went through the whole state of Nebraska, and the medical care providers, they help you do a little bit of something, but they think, oh, well, we helped you with speech and language. Now they basically send you out the door and say, have a good life. And as a registered nurse, I knew how I had been treated, and I did not want anyone else to be treated the same way that I was. And so I ended up, everybody who had been in the support group out here started in 2000. And as people have come and gone, if they haven't needed the support group anymore, they just don't come. So I am now the support group leader. I've been for a number of years now, but I have always tried to help the people to know that there's more to what we can do. And as a medical provider and as a person with a brain injury, I can speak to both fields. And I'd always been interested in the brain. And so I love working with the people. I see how the peer-to-peer support and what I have done have helped people here, that I still have value and I still have worth, and I can still help people. And I have to look at my list because I do have a brain injury. So I love to work with the medical field and help them realize and find out the different treatments that are involved, and so that we can actually have a better existence. And I'm sorry Sean has a brain injury, but us being RNs together, and I know some other RNs that have brain injuries, that we connect at a different level, and we both have the need to be able to help people yet. So I think that's what that question was about.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really well stated. So many of the themes that you brought up were the ones that Kristen brought up in the chat, and just that need for greater information and understanding about what brain injury is and what it isn't. And it doesn't change the background, the expertise, the knowledge, you know, of individuals like yourselves and like all of you that are on this session today that have a brain injury. A lot of focus is on what peer support recipients get from a peer support relationship. Can you talk about, and you've done a little bit of this already, but is there anything you'd like to add that that you've personally experienced as a peer support provider?
Yes, this is an exciting part, is because I have met these people with the brain injury. I knew where they were when they started because I've been there too. How they react when you come alongside of them and they find out that they're not alone in their having a brain injury and the things that can happen. And Shauna, you're looking at me. And to know where these people started out at, and by coming alongside of them, be able to let them know that I know exactly what they're going through. And I might give a little example of how I have solved that little thing in my life. We were talking yesterday when I bake. I can't remember how much or whatever I put in, and so every cup of whatever, it's a spoon, and so I put the spoon on the counter so that I can use that to count how much is in there. And so it's little adaptations. Now people would never know, you know, to look at us. We all look fine, but Shauna said something about counting change, and yes, I've had to have people count my money back to me because you couldn't do it right then, and being tired or sick or fatigued, all that adds to the problem. And so back to the group, I know where these people started at, and to come alongside of them. And then we did this peer support program, and the people went through the program one video at a time, and we could stop the video and we could talk about it. And the people have come to realize that they have really had, they're farther along in their journey, when they remember where they started out at, and it had given them all more confidence, and it was wonderful. It was like they were budding and blooming, and we developed a trust and a relationship that we feel very safe about, because we were among peers who had the same issues. And now I know I'm not alone with not being able to remember what day it is or whatever. So that it's like, hey, I'm okay. I can look on my phone. So it's wonderful how the people have come along with the peer support, that they have more confidence in themselves, and they are also listening to other people in their conversations. Now, as the chair of the Brain Injury Advisory Council, I have business cards, and on the front it gives my information, but on the back of it, it gives signs and symptoms of a brain injury. And so as we're just visiting with people, it could be at the store, it could be anywhere, and we can hear what other people are talking about. And if we're in conversation with them, if somebody says they fell out of a tree when they were 10 and hit their head on the back of a trash can burning barrel, and their scalp came around to their face. And this person can't understand why they can't hold a job. Well, it's because no one has helped them by recognizing that they have a brain injury issue, and to be able to pass out at least my business card with some contact information and the Brain Injury Advisory Council, that they know that, hey, maybe they turn the card over and they read the signs and symptoms, and they say, I have that, I have that, I have that. And so by giving them a card, it allows them to enter into the world of other people who have that injury, and maybe there is a reason why you can't hold a job or can't. Okay, I probably talked longer than my 5 minutes, so thank you.
Oh, you all brought up themes and areas of importance that I don't think any of us could have added to this session today. So Judy and Trina and Shauna, thank you so much for your preparations to contribute today as you did. Really appreciative. So yes, absolutely. And we're going to jump back now into the training and go back into more information sharing. Hopefully now you all are seeing a map of the United States, and this map is, let me just double check and make sure everything is good with the screen share.
Looks good, Jill.
Awesome, thank you. This is a map that was created that shows the states that are delivering peer supports. There also, it may include states that are exploring peer supports in brain injury. It's not inclusive of all peer support programs. So for instance, when I mentioned earlier, those programs that are focused on spinal cord injury, while a person might have a spinal cord injury and a brain injury, we did not include specific spinal cord injury programs on this map. It again may not be all inclusive. We're hoping to see more and more red over the years as states bring on this important programming. So now we'll do what I mentioned earlier, and that is to go a little bit more by state and just a brief cursory review of some of the standouts that are true from where peer programming is happening from East Coast to West Coast. We'll start on the West Coast, and that is with Alaska. And they are operated under the Traumatic and Acquired Brain Injury Program. So that's the second column, is who's actually providing the peer support, not who's administering it, because if that was the case, it might be the state of Nebraska or the state of Alaska, but really down to the provider is what we put in this second column. In the third column, where we had the information, we included how the peer programming is being funded, and then whether or not the program is paid or volunteer, and then anything that is unique about the program is in the last column. So again, the Alaska program is running through TABI, is what they call the Traumatic and Acquired Brain Injury Program, through some grant funds, which is called the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, that are short term. So they are utilizing those, and they are the first state that we'll mention that has a volunteer program. Going on to California, Rancho Los Amigos in the Los Angeles County area has an interesting arrangement with the LA County Board of Supervisors, and they also get charitable gifts and donations to allow them to run a program that's partially paid and partially volunteer. And that's a rehab facility. So that's that rehab to home model that we talked about earlier. Colorado is a state with 3 programs in it, actually. The first one we'll talk about is the Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado, and it started with some administration for community living grant, so a federal grant that allowed for the program to be built. But they're currently running with a local grant and shifting to state general fund and trust fund. It's a volunteer program, and what's unique about this program at BIAC, or Brain Injury Alliance of Colorado, is that they serve youth as well. The second program in Colorado is Craig Hospital, another hospital to home program, which is volunteer. And then kind of up and coming is a program through the Medicaid department in Colorado. Healthcare Policy and Financing is the agency that is administering the program, and they're really looking to build on and make this a fuller program in the coming years. It's a federal to state match with paid peers, and it serves their brain injury waiver participants who are 16 and older. Louisiana has a program that is a little bit in a development stage or launching stage. And then Georgia is in a little bit of the same situation with their volunteer program that they're running through grants and charitable gifts and donations. Maine has a program called Brain Injury Voices, and that is run through charitable gifts and donations. And more recently, as we understand it, they've been provided some state funds to grow that peer program. And it is, again, volunteer. So I think you're probably seeing a theme here, which is that there are definitely more volunteer than paid programs currently. Maryland is on here because of what I described earlier and their approach to training individuals that provide peer support in the behavioral health system. We'll talk a little bit more about Maryland in a bit. Nebraska is in the post-pilot stage of the program that Carrie talked about very specifically earlier, that did have some ACL grant funding attached to it and was provided, coordinated through NIBN, the Nebraska Injured Brain Network. And some of the individuals that were involved in the pilot were paid, as we understand it. And then exciting and emerging, and this was actually a last minute addition because I didn't realize how far it's come along, but the Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska has peer programming that it's developing. It will be volunteer. And what's interesting about, I think, the approach with the Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska, as I understand it, and there may be more time to process this in the third hour, is that the resource facilitators actually kind of coordinate and make sure the program runs. Now, the resource facilitators are paid through state funds and Medicaid administrative claiming reimbursements. So there is money that flows to allow that peer programming to happen. And so I believe that they're in some recruiting and training stages currently. And just like other states that we've mentioned earlier, there are those that have more than one. And it seems to me that that's a blessing to be able to have different options within a state. We talked about North Dakota's program already quite a bit, so I won't spend much time there. Again, that it is Medicaid reimbursed peer support programming, and the individuals that provide those supports are paid. And that takes us to the last three on the chart, and that is Texas. Baylor, that state has a couple of programs as well. One of them is at Baylor Scott and White Institute for Rehabilitation, and their funding comes from their foundation, and they're able to offer a hospital to home program, which, as has been mentioned earlier, is volunteer. And then the Texas program, Hope After Brain Injury, it's located in the Dallas area, and they get charitable gifts and donations to run their volunteer program. And it is the one that we talked about earlier today, which is faith-based. And then finally, there's some activity happening in Wisconsin with SOAR Fox Cities. They had a volunteer program. Sometimes when staffing changes occur, there can be interruptions, and this program, as we understand it, is currently paused. So that takes us to program highlights and updates. You know, we talked earlier about the North Dakota Brain Injury Network and how that brain injury program is able to interface with the Medicaid 1915I program for people that have brain injuries. They are certified peer supporters in that state, and I believe that we've covered the bulk of the rest of the information about North Dakota, other than they've got another mini program within North Dakota that matches, they call them veteran survivors, with matched newer survivors in what's called their Survivor Connections program. And we've understood that sometimes how that model works is that it's phone-based, and a peer and a survivor come together, perhaps virtually, and sometimes the resource facilitator joins those calls. So maybe a little bit of a different dynamic there, but one of some interest. And then the main Brain Injury Voices is very focused on the whole idea of paying it forward. And it's a state project has allowed this program to grow somewhat. And that is another one that I'm keeping my eye on in particular. And then we talked a little bit about Texas and how they run two different programs, and that Colorado is, I think the thing that stands out for me about Colorado is that when funding begins to, and looks like it's going to start to wrap, they're always keeping their eye on, okay, what funding might be able to come next. And they're shifting to, I think, their third approach. So we are at about 10 till the hour. I'm just going to run through these slides rather briefly, but wanted to plant some additional seeds before we go into the discussion phase of today. And the first is some ideas, and it's not all inclusive, but it is how funding has been accomplished in states. And you saw these referenced in the table. Hospital foundation funding, local philanthropy or community foundation grants, which technically tend to be short-term, kind of startup oriented, and you have to have a sustainability plan oftentimes to go for those. Federal grants and ACL, you've heard that mentioned a little bit. The Administration for Community Living is a very powerful brain injury federal grant that a number of states have incorporated peer support dollars into, particularly for some of that building and startup. Then we definitely see the private donations, and we see how other federal agencies like SAMHSA, or the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, plays a role in the provision of the behavioral health peer supports in mental health centers, where then individuals with brain injury we know are being served as well. And then we talked about the home and community-based services waivers, such as the ones in Colorado and North Dakota. A consideration about the importance of establishing the program purpose, really knowing what is going to be the goal of the program. Is it to make sure that people have good connections when they are maybe first adjusting to brain injury? Is it going to be, through brief-oriented measures, or is there really a much more in-depth idea around change, quality of life change, people flourishing more and thriving more? It's important, we believe, to think about whether or not you are anticipating measuring outcomes and how you'll do that. I would offer up that when you can think about ways to show the positive changes and outcomes that are a result of peer programming, it perhaps helps you with that future funding or fundraising. And so if there's some ways to incorporate that, either through some type of measures that we talked about briefly, we'll talk about more, or some kind of post and pre and post kind of surveys, there's a lot of innovative ways to get at how much change has occurred. And then thinking again about the message of empowerment and hope, and even thinking about that terminology and really how the program is marketed and outreached. This slide has a lot on it, but it's meant to do that in a way because programs that are more formal and are building procedures and policies are thinking about a lot of different factors, and no one state probably is looking at every single one of these, but they all are a conversation in and of themselves. There are topics like confidentiality and mandatory reporting, where, you know, if an individual learns of abuse or neglect for a child or an adult with a disability, areas like how reasonable accommodations get delivered. You can see, and we won't go through all of these, the things that just need to be thought about and how a program is going to approach these different topics. Personnel is a topic that, you know, is, I think, a way to say that it is, if at all possible, it's wonderful to have someone that's in that coordination role. However, we've heard of, you know, a program where the facilitation, the coordination has been added to job duties of a resource facilitator. You know, innovation is key. And with personnel, you know, if you have the luxury of this, or if there's an opportunity for coordination, or even if it's done by a volunteer or added duties, those personnel may be doing things such as coordinating and managing the program. They may have an involvement with doing the matching. They may be doing some supervision. They may be involved and they may be delivering training, doing recruitment of peers. And this one's a biggie, I think, and that's supporting whenever concerns arise or there's red flag issues. Knowing the way that a program is going to handle those when those come up is of a lot of importance. And some programs start with a very part-time peer support coordinator if they have them. Another consideration is whether or not the target population is going to be very broad or if it's going to be a little bit narrower in scope. So I've included just examples of different types of focused target areas for peer supports that, you know, we see whether it's in brain injury or not in brain injury. I think from there, it's important to also add the consideration of age. We talked earlier about how Colorado is running a program that recruits peer youth with brain injury and then does that matching. Will that be what is looking like in Nebraska, or will it be more of an adult program? And then, as we talked about earlier, how do the family members and caregivers get factored in? And moving on, another population consideration are sometimes a little bit trickier areas, but worthy of discussion early on. And that is the program going to screen individuals for safety reasons? And when I say screen individuals, primarily, well, on both sides, for providing peer supports and receiving peer supports. Will the program do background checks for, you know, both or all of those that are involved with the program? To what extent will individuals be identified at risk in a program that will take place beyond direct oversight and supervision? Meaning, is there any value or opportunity or possibility for providing that peer support in more of a central location where there's, more staff or more parties that are present? And will the peer support take place in person, or will it be limited to remote methods? Because that may be another strategy, is just to conclude that remote may be the way that a program wants to go. Liability is a topic of interest, and it really is of value to think about when you consider that you may have in-person peer support happening. The transportation may come up as a question. There are likely peer programs that have policies that restrict completely any type of transportation activities, but again, you all are in the building stage. There are other kind of strategies around this topic of managing risk, and that could be participation contracts, volunteer liability and release of information forms, and other types of waivers. There may be some examples that we can provide, if any of these are of interest. And of note, there are actually peer recovery support specialist liability insurance programs out there. One of them is with the National Association for Addiction Professionals. So this is a real growing field, and there are, these options that sit out there for liability coverage. Trainings come up a little bit in the chat, and it's an area of much importance. And what we've put down here is that there are different approaches to training, from very comprehensive 2-week, half day, each day trainings to, maybe a half day training. Depends on the formality or the informality of the program. So what we see here are that training may really forward a more traditional approach with kind of an active listening model. It may be more motivational and role model design. A lot of the different kinds of topics that would be incorporated into a training are listed at the bottom. A thing of note is to mention that in the mental health system, there's quite a bit of focus on traditional listening focus, and other peer programs such as brain injury, kind of more so approach, how to uplift, how to coach, so there really are some differences in how these get set up. There may be, if it's a hospital program, a peer may have to go, in addition to peer training, they may need to go through a hospital volunteer training. A state may consider train the trainer. If they're doing online training, they may realize that they can't do as much in the way of role plays, but they can do scenarios. And recording trainings that allow for continued and future access. Matching is a really big topic. We could probably spend quite a bit of time on it, but it can definitely include some of the points that are listed here. Of importance is not doing harm and keeping that person-centered perspective, so that maybe the participant indicates what they would like to see as far as a peer, or they may say what topics are just off limits, and maybe that helps with matching. They, in an ideal world, maybe they have 2 peers from which to pick, and then they decide who might be the better match for themselves. So again, on the left side, there are a number of different matching considerations that you can take a look at now, and then in the slides that are sent out as a result of this training. Kind of in a wrap-up mode, but just bringing up some of the different areas that may be considerations in peer programming, and that is the program going to focus on self-advocacy, which is a growing important area for brain injury, is to see that individuals can speak for themselves, that they can self-represent. Advocacy is more representing another person or speaking on their behalf. And to be honest, there are other resources a lot of times for advocacy. An example might be the client assistance program that helps advocate for people with disabilities when they're trying to get employment supports and services. Recovery versus resilience. Recovery is, is sometimes looked at in a myriad of different ways, depending on the person. And it'll just be important to square off with how the Nebraska program sits. In the pilot, it was very much a recovery focus. And that, just making sure that through messaging and outreach that's not misconstrued, that a person's going to return to a normal condition. Some of the things like Trina mentioned earlier. Best practices, consistency. It's very important when developing and when running the program. And if you create positions for survivors, really make sure that you focus in on strengths and what inspires them. If possible, secure a point person that takes a leadership role, like what we talked about earlier, which could be a coordinator, and then planning for the financial stability of the program. I included a guide or a tool that some programs use, and it's the wellness wheel, which are the dimensions of a well-rounded life. It could be used more individually by a person with a brain injury. There may be ways to incorporate a tool like this into peer programming. Evaluation approaches, we talked about it just a little bit earlier, but some very formal programs might start with building a roadmap or a logic model. Sometimes is what it's called, where a lot of detail and thought goes into what is the problem we're trying to solve, and what are the activities we're going to do, and what are the outcomes that we anticipate getting. That is a little bit of a dedication of time to do that. That can help with thinking through how to evaluate. Some examples of some scales and assessments have been listed here that we see. Satisfaction with life is an assessment, a depression inventory. There's also some other ones like the flourishing scale. They can be done at the beginning of a program and at the end that really help to see the change that occurred. If not that, there could just be questionnaires. And a message about the questionnaire is thinking about not only, trying to find out, did the support work? Did the peer support work? But really wanting to understand through building a questionnaire, how did it work? And then certainly there is always the place for satisfaction surveys. So in closing, why peer support? Well, so many reasons. The satisfaction in assisting others that has been really nailed down today by many of you in the chat or through your presentations. Increased self-confidence, decreased isolation, increased self-advocacy skills, and increased insight. And I think I heard this talked about maybe a couple times today, but I will close with it. And that is, I can walk beside you and be a support to you along the way.
Okay, great. We are at our last part of our process today with the Peer Support Summit. Again, really great information. And I see excellent comments in the chat, and there's some questions in the chat. And if we don't get to your question in the next 45 minutes or so, we will be sure to get you an answer in the future in an email, if that's okay with folks. So here's how we're thinking we can manage a bigger crowd and trying to have a personal discussion when we're talking over Zoom. First of all, again, if you are willing, if you could turn on your cameras, that'd be great. Then we can see you. If you have any points you'd like to make related to, we have 3 discussion questions. I'll just run through the 3 discussion questions in a minute here, but that way you're prepared. But what we'd like you to do is, first, we're going to have people put answers or just thoughts, gut reactions to these questions in the chat or on a Jamboard. And I don't know if many people have used the Jamboard. And Jill, I would like you to explain it because I haven't used it, but you have, and you're going to help me with it.
Absolutely. When we get to open the Jamboard, I'll make sure that everyone has some tips on that option if you choose to use it.
Okay, great. Okay, so that'll be the first 2 ways to respond. The third way, then, once we entertain chats and Jamboard input, we will go ahead and have you raise your hand if you'd like to give a verbal response. And it's important that you raise your hand so that we can kind of monitor who needs to talk next. And that you can do, if you're not familiar, let's see, you go to your reactions tab on the bottom of your screen, and you will see the option to raise hand. I'll do it just to show you. It puts you right to the top. So that way we can know who's next to call on. So we appreciate you using that instead of coming off a mic initially, and then we'll invite you to come off your mic. Okay, so the 3 questions that we have, one is, what are your reactions to the various models presented? What did you like and what didn't you like? The second question is, what is important to you in regard to peer support? And then the third is, what are the components that are important to you in regard to training for people who want to provide peer support? I will say that I've gotten a lot of answers to these questions already in the chat, which is great, but we'll have you go ahead and jump back in during this discussion period. So Jill, do you want to pull up the Jamboard and help walk us through that?
This is a tool called Jamboard. It's in Google Suite. So again, as Judy mentioned, there's 3 different options for giving input. You don't have to use this, but in the chat is a link to Jamboard that you can click on, and you will be in this tool like I am. And this is a way for you to provide some answers to the questions that Judy went over. And the way that we'd like to do that, it's really pretty simple. We'll have 4 questions as we tab through, because we broke up the first question about what you liked and what you didn't like. But the very first one that we're going to talk about is what are your reactions to the various models presented and what did you like? So the only thing you need to do is come down here to the small square with the lines on it that's 4 rows down on the left side. So when you hover over it, it says sticky note. And when you do that, you can just type in your comment, and you can pick your own color if you would like. We don't want to add too many bells and whistles, but you're free to pick a color. And once you've added your sticky note, just hit save. And then it will pop up. And what we like about this is that you're going to see the input that everyone is giving at the same time. So I'm going to delete my comment there and turn it back over to you, Judy.
Great. And you can see that I put the questions in the chat just to refresh your memory, but that way they're there and they're also on the Jamboard that will be showing. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. If you could put in the chat or on the Jamboard, what are your reactions to the various models you presented? And let's focus on what you did like with the models that were presented. Great. I like the model that had someone coordinating the effort. Other thoughts? I'm trying to watch the Jamboard and the chat, but my friends on here will help me out, I know. While you're thinking, I'm going to throw out some terms that I saw reflected in the chat earlier and in the comments that people made, but it seems that having a model based on respect, mutual respect, is important. Okay, and then we have, with implementation of the 988 system, all virtual or telephone hotline peer support is easiest way to consolidate and federalize all the state programs and allow nationwide personnel volunteer-based crisis teams already included in peer support. I have had good ones and bad. That's my interpretation of that, AAA bad ones, just ideas. Okay, and for those who are not aware, the 988 is the crisis system that SAMHSA rolled out this last year. And then Carla said, I agree about having someone coordinate. I think it's helpful to have it be formalized so there's opportunity to check in, address any questions, etc. Sure, we have several people in the Western and Panhandle part of the state going or doing peer support, maybe.
Doing.
Doing, thank you, sure. Program based on mutual respect is in here. Boy, that's small typing. I appreciate that there are models that consider several variables: age, disability, hospital to home. I like the model that has, coordinating, we already talked about that. And then someone said, can't remember a specific model. And if you can't remember a specific model, that's okay. Maybe thinking about what are the components that we'll get to that a little bit too. What you would like to see.
I was gonna say, I probably can't type this because I can't use my arm to type. But on that, I would like to put, I love that they have a lot of different, like you can be a peer support specialist, whatnot. I like that they have a lot of different models.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other comments on this one before we move to part 2 of this question? Okay, Rita, the crossover link between brain injury and behavioral health, and this being more acknowledged and addressed. That's a good point. So much co-occurrence there.
And one late note on the Jamboard is that an individual liked the programs that provided some tips on how to best support a person and what peer support is not. All right, should we tab to the next one, Judy?
Let's do that. One more thing, my sister has had a few brain injuries and behavioral health and is very prevalent. She had behavioral health beforehand. Yes, that's common. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, let's go to the next question, Jill.
So this will be a brand new Jamboard, and just do the same process as the last time to add your notes if you want to participate on the Jamboard.
So as you think about the models that were presented, what did you not like? So let's try to figure out what it is you're hoping does not happen with peer support. You know what, I'm going to broaden this because of the comment that can't remember the models, and that's very understandable. Just thinking about any components you want to be sure that we do not include in a peer support model. Making connections and promoting is hard. Yes, for sure. Lack of youth models in part of the state. Okay, so you'd like to see, I know I saw that comment earlier that it'd be helpful to have more models for youth and young adults. Making sure there's a sustainability plan. That's an excellent point. And while you're thinking on that note, you know, we have to think about what's feasible too in Nebraska with resources that you currently have. So, you know, that's something that will be in consideration as we take this feedback to ensure that it's something that can be sustained and not set this up for failure, but rather success. Agreed, reaching out or referring to be received, hard to reach, or get return calls. Right. Sometimes it's hard for that follow through.
We saw one pop into up above that the liability coverage mentioned is it should be a concern or a topic.
Thank you for catching that.
Oh, yeah.
I would want a coordinator who has exposure to brain injuries, either academically or survivors themselves. So someone with that knowledge of brain injury is a critical component, personal perspective or otherwise, it sounds like from this person's perspective. Thank you, Emery. Group effort here, we absolutely don't want this to end up, my own reaction is in the way of my comment, this to end up being a mentorship program. Okay, so Shauna's feeling strongly about, as Jill mentioned, the difference between mentorship and peer support. Mentorship being someone is mentoring another person so they're not at a shared experience level. All models needed for success, sure says, and that's true. There could be various models in your state to meet various people's needs. To Shauna's point, like medical terminology, problematic, what is meant? I'm not sure if I understand that comment.
Well, just like with injured brain, brain injury, mentor, peer,
Got it.
all the different terminology can be so confusing.
Got it. That's a really good
Mhm.
point. So making sure that things are clearly defined, regardless of where you land with the program. Okay. And then I'm just reading these out so you guys can see them if not everybody can see the chats. But I like the idea of training peer facilitators, but then turning over the groups to them to run. However, it would be nice to have professional mentor for the facilitators to talk to about running the group until they get comfortable dealing with the things that come up in the group. Our group voted to only have brain injury survivors so that we could be honest about our frustrations and not encounter the condescension of professionals. That's a great model, great way to think about it. Did I miss anything come up on the Jamboard, Jill?
We just had a couple. The blue is that paid peers need to understand that they're a peer, not an advisor, not a superior to the one receiving the support. And I think it's important to reach beyond the support group model. And then someone just indicated they really like the peer-to-peer versus mentor-to-peer as a model.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we've captured.
And so a question to you, Judy, do you want to stop here and open it up for the verbal commentary on these two topics of what people liked or didn't like, or just finish all four first?
Let's go ahead and open up to verbal. I think that's a great
Okay.
idea, just to keep track of the same question. There were a couple more that came in to the chat. I would like guidance about the liability insurance you mentioned. We came up with a legal disclaimer about how we are not professional counselors, but being really careful about what those boundaries are, it sounds like. Also, PAS program for client referrals through Medicaid billing for funding. And we get a list of emails from programs mentioned. Oh, yep. I think we could do that, Jill, can we?
Yeah, I think we actually have a ready list of that. So when those slides get sent out, we can send out contact information for the states that we mentioned today.
Great. I am going to mention this last chat here. Shauna, amen. There's a completely different level of trust with someone who has an injury as compared to someone who has been trained or educated in brain injury. So thinking about that mutual experience as a way of trust and a way to open up to each other. Excellent. Okay. So Kathy, thank you for raising your hand. If you want to share something on this question, please go ahead. Or these two.
One, I can't figure out this Jamboard thing,
That's okay.
but there is a hierarchy in brain injury that I've had my injury for 40 years. But I'm also a person who is in a wheelchair, who talks funny, does all the other, so it's like I'm on the lowest level of brain injury because there's a number of stereotypical ideas that are out there by people with brain injury of what a brain injury should look like. And it would be really disheartening if that was to be carried over into a peer mentoring program.
Excellent point, Kathy. So just being careful, I guess, to ensure inclusivity of all people with brain injuries, regardless of what that level of brain injury might be, to ensure that you're
what it looks like.
or what it looks like, right, Kathy? Great point. Thank you. Anybody else want to raise their hand and offer a verbal comment at this point?
I would like to know how you would be able, are we still on Barry's models presented?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. I just was, yeah, I'll ask later.
Okay, sounds good, sure. Kristen,
Hi there. There we go. My thing came up. I think most of what I would want to say I've kind of put in the chat because we kind of created our own thing in Northern Virginia about they had groups here run by professionals that we thought were not helpful and were condescending, or that had caregivers in them and people were afraid to talk about things with caregivers present. And we can't be so honest. So we started our own and tried to come up with our own rules, our own way of doing things. But the fact that you guys are trying to come up with this peer support group model would really help more places start these things, because you don't often know how to get such a thing started, or how to learn how to deal with some of the mental health issues that come up in these kinds of groups. And if we're not counselors, what do you do when someone comes to the group and is suicidal, or someone comes to the group in the midst of a meltdown? That kind of training to help the facilitators deal with that and refer those people to the properly trained people would be another good thing to add to the train the facilitators program, because otherwise it'll be harder to find people willing to do it.
those are very excellent points, Kristen. Just that being aware and having some level of understanding of behavioral health issues or concerns that might arise when in a peer support kind of setting. So equipping people to be able to address that and deal with that, I think, is such an excellent point. Thank you. Anne Marie, I see that you put in the chat, you're struggling to figure out how to do the hand raising. No problem. Why don't you go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question or your point.
I guess I just wanted to let Kristen know that I totally agree with what you're saying about being condescending or talked down to, and by somebody who may be academically trained about brain injury, but may not know what it feels like. And likewise, having somebody that is neither a survivor themselves, nor are they academically trained, somebody that's totally outside the realm is even worse, having them as a coordinator. So I just wanted to say that, but I totally agree with everything you said. That's all I wanted to say. And I still don't know how to do the raise your hand function. So
I'm sorry, Anne-Marie, but go ahead, and if you have more to add, you can definitely put that in the chat and I'll try to catch that and open it up. Thank you. And then Chris mentioned, I just kind of a validation for Kathy, what Kathy was saying. It was mentioned that a lot of people we work with have invisible injury. I think people like Kathy H that are very involved in vocal advocates helps to understand that one person with a brain injury only means one person with a brain injury and not all. Great point. Okay. I think any other comments related to the models, what you like and didn't like, before we move to question number 2? All right. Thank you, everybody. That's very helpful. If we could go to question number 2. And again, let's start with the process of put it in chat or put it on the Jamboard, and then we'll go to verbal comments after those 2 are done. So if you have something to share that you feel like you want to put in the chat or the Jamboard or know how to do that, please go ahead and do that now. But what is important to you in regard to peer support? I know we've been talking a fair amount about it throughout. So if you could just go ahead and put those in that Jamboard or chat, that's very helpful for us to capture all your ideas and thoughts. I'm just gonna, while you guys are thinking, some of the things that were talked about again. Okay, great, Kristen. Validation is the most important thing our members get. And I definitely heard that theme throughout, that validation of experience, that common understanding, that people have this shared experience, and even if it's not exactly the same experience, but you have a common understanding of each other. Joshua said advocacy. The other comment that was in the chat and was echoed in the presentations was that understanding that living with a brain injury is often lifelong. So recognizing that is something that people will live with for the rest of their life. That the peer-to-peer support builds the confidence of each other. It's on the same level of each other. That's a great point, Cher. And Marie says, I would like training and self-advocacy to be provided. That's a great comment as well. Anne Marie got a heart. Okay, so Nita says it's important for people to feel like they are in a safe space, non-judgmental zone. I like the no advice guideline. Sorry, chats are coming in, so it's moving. That is hard to do, although supporting someone to come up with their own solutions would be more appropriate. Excellent point. Carla, the supportive, non-judgmental relationship based on unconditional positive regard. Great, echoing that. Understanding TBI survivors are lacking in confidence, so it's easy to talk down to them unintentionally. So being very mindful of how we're talking, I think, is an important factor. Jill, can you read the Jamboard that came in?
I sure can. And one earlier in the chat was really around building empathy in both peers to regain and strengthen those important skills. I think so, not assuming that, demonstrating empathy, that there can be some learning around that and some skill development. Feel like remembering it is not a mentoring program is important, and having a consistent approach that's rooted in positive attitudes and philosophy about brain injury. And then a specific Medicaid comment was, with certain states looking at home and community-based waivers, that Nebraska opens up the potential to peer services to families that have children with ID and intellectual disability and developmental disability.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another point that came in the chat, agree to the lifelong comment, rehab discharges people and leave them on their own to navigate the rest of their lives alone. People need more help and guidance and cognitive rehab. Thanks, brain education strategies, training for filling that gap. Okay, that's great. And then that the peer shows up and can be reached, so that kind of having that reliability from each other is an important factor. Sorry, Jill, I keep putting you on the spot to read those because I can't.
No, I
was
was just waiting for the opening, having accountability and follow through for peers, so someone in need does not get lost or forgotten. So it seems like that emphasizes, or a little bit more around some of the expectations and potentially procedures. In the pink it is important to realize that not everyone will have the exact same experience. Meet people where they are versus what your perspective is the only perspective.
That's a nice way to put that. I like that. And then Kristen added, technology, not training is best. Can you, Kristen, do you mind coming off mic to explain that a little more?
Yeah, sure. That's just a nonprofit out in California that a lot of us, there's probably like 11 or 12 from our Northern Virginia group that found them, and they do webinars and workshops and discussion groups that deal with how to, after you get out of rehab, how do you learn how to navigate the world again? And so that was kind of an extension of my comment about being dumped on our own. And it took a long time for some in our group to find some place that provided that.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. Anne Marie said the survivor's family should also be supported post-discharge. Thanks for bringing that up because that came up earlier and it's good to have it reflected here as well. Chris added supportive of families who don't understand and can't help their loved one because emotional connection, but can learn from another peer with similar symptoms. Good comment. Okay. All right, with this question at this point, I'd like to go ahead if you have something you want to add that you haven't, and if you'd like to raise your hand and come off mute, then we can get your comments as well. So what is important to you in regard to peer support? This is a chance if you want to do that comment verbally.
I think my main thing for peer support is they have to be available. We can't refer people over to, say, places that do peer support and not have them respond for 2 weeks or whatnot, or not be available via email. We have to be able to know that they are there. And so
Okay.
that's very, very important. It's frustrating to send somebody somewhere for peer support and them not be able to get the help. So then that makes us not want to refer. So what do? So we have to do something. We have to figure that part out.
Okay, that's great to add. And then Shauna added, self-advocacy grew naturally from the confidence we gained as we traveled the peer-to-peer path. Both the peer being assisted and the peer doing the assisting grew. That is that's great to share that experience, Shauna. Thank you. And Chris agreed. Okay, anybody else want to add to this question? Before we move on to our last one. All right, I'm not seeing anybody. It's hard because there's a lot of people, so I'm trying to scroll and see what's happening out there. But it looks like we're ready to move on to our final question. So this question is, what are the components that are important to you in regard to training for people who want to provide peer support? Now, Jill did a great job talking about terminology. I use peer support in this question pretty loosely. So just kind of think of any peer program, any peer approach to peer mentoring support, whatever it is that you might land on. But what are the components that are important to you in regard to training? Okay, and then I can read this one. Making the training easily accessible, straightforward, and easy to follow. Person-centered and person-directed. McIntyre, thank you for raising your hand if you want to come off mute.
I think one of the most important things in peer support is the volunteers are going to have to be very, very patient. I'm a TBI survivor, and it's taken 4 years just to me to get past getting my work done and getting collected enough to want to get involved in being a help in some way, shape, or form. And in my experience, people don't understand how that TBI affects people, and it takes us a little bit longer to get things figured out. And my experience has then been that nobody has patience for us because they want results or expectations right now. And so
Okay.
people that volunteer in that are going to have to be really slow and thoughtful and understand how that works.
Great comment, thank you. Explaining what peer support isn't, for example, counseling, resource facilitation, transportation services, etc. Making that clear in the training, what those boundaries are related to peer support. What are the other components that people would like to share? Penny, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to also kind of comment on what the previous gentleman said about, well, when you talk about peer support, it's a shared experience. I mean, that's the heart of the relationship. And so I would hope that whoever is offering this peer support is going to have that kind of patience because they've been through this and they know that. And I've gone through peer support training myself, and I facilitate the virtual support groups 4 times a month for the Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska. And so we have meetings, again, 4 times a month. We have 1 meeting each for family members and caregivers only. We have 1 for survivors only. And then we have 2 meetings that are open to everybody. And those have been very fruitful discussions. But the heart of peer support is that the person providing the peer support is supposed to have been able to come to terms with their own symptoms enough and to be successful enough at managing their symptoms that they can be a model to the people that they're working with. And so I'm sorry to hear this person's experience has been that people don't have patience with him, because I think that that's a really important part of the model. And so it makes me wonder who it is that's providing the peer support in that situation.
Great, thank you, Penny. Appreciate the comments. Chris, you also have your hand up.
Yeah, Penny does a fabulous job. I'm promoting here because I attend her virtual support groups. And I guess what I've learned mostly from that, and there again, your own perceptions of this, is that after a brain injury, it seems like people are really critical of themselves, and they may think that people are impatient with them, but actually, I find that they really do well in expressing themselves, maybe not exactly the way they want to say it, but I think that what they have to say is worthwhile and worth waiting for. And I do think that we need people who are willing to listen, but also validate that you're making sense, you know?
Great points. I'm going to read a few of the chats. Shauna put that the training materials need to be repeatable. That is such an excellent point. The peers are people with brain injury. We need to be able to watch, hear, read over and over until we get it. So excellent point about access to training being repeatable, so it can kind of sink in for you. You can digest it all. Kristen added, virtual training will reach more people. Many of our members can't drive. Provide mentorship for peer facilitators. Provide startup help like legal disclaimers, info on liability insurance, and tech help, in addition to training people how to facilitate a support group so that all members feel heard. Great. And then Anne Marie added, I found it extremely helpful to have the assignment, interview your family members to learn of their perspective toward traumatic experience and its aftermath. So again, kind of with that focus, thinking about how to include families in this process. Carla, I can appreciate McIntyre's comment. The person serving as peer supporter needs to know their limitations and strengths. To Penny's point, making sure the peer supporter can identify tendencies that they may have in their own personality, such as giving advice or direction, rather than supporting a person to come to their own decision and path. Kristen, in the training, give ideas about raising topics directly related to living with brain injury. Our facilitators brainstormed and asked members to give us a list of what they struggle with most. That captures the chats. I think I've been seeing out of the corner of my eye some things come up on the Jamboard. Jill, do you have?
Yeah, just a couple things, some emphasis around placing self-care as a component in the training, and making sure they're within the training that people walk away with a good understanding of who they'll turn to if they have questions, someone they could bounce things off of if they needed to do so. I'm not sure if we mentioned this one, but someone mentioned the practice, you know, incorporating practice into the training models. And then I was going back through some of the chats from during the presentation, and just a couple themes I was going to re-emphasize that I read from some of you all is trying to figure out ways that there can be peer input into the peer training and make sure that, you know, it's really something that peers can support because they've had a chance to provide some input. And then earlier on in today's session, there was also, I think, some interest in the train the trainer model, if that can be thought through or incorporated.
Great, thank you, Jill. And then Kristen added that agree with McIntyre, need facilitators who focus on training, or excuse me, who focus on facilitating discussion, not taking over the group to run it from top down. Include video scenarios in the training so that peer facilitators can see examples of what they might encounter and how they could respond. That's a great idea. Really excellent, excellent discussion, you all. We've been kind of doing this throughout, but if you have anything verbally you want to add, thank you, Trina. By way of example, Trina, thanks for raising your hand. If you want to come off mute and share what you wanted to.
In some of the things that you're sharing, I feel like when we developed the pilot part of the training, that there were some really useful things that are being addressed here, as far as what it was initially set up to be used as a peer supporting a peer, but the way it ended up because of COVID is that we did it as a group, and it was still peers supporting peers, but we were supporting each other who were doing the training. And I feel like some of the things like what Shauna said, that the fact that we practiced, and Anne Marie said we had questions that we were going to take to the peers when we supported them, but we did them ourselves. And the trainings were recorded, so the discussion of the groups that were involved in the initial training gave us some understanding of what conversations we had during the training. And so there's some really good learning tools in that you can go back and listen and read and relearn, like Shauna said, some of that material. Thank you.
Excellent points. Kristen added, for brain injury folks, sometimes seeing and doing is more helpful than merely hearing someone talk about them. And I'll read a couple more here and then sure I'll go to you. I think that is why peers should be resource facilitators, because they are offering options that are available where peers are not expected to give answers, just opportunities to talk about needs and goals. Sorry, meant difference between peers and resource facilitators. Sorry, Chris, I should have looked at your second part there first. And then, sure, go ahead, and I'll read the next couple here after you're done.
I wanted to add to what Chris said, as a resource facilitator and a peer support person. And I do multiple other things. I always call myself a Jill of all trades. I do want everyone to remember that when you are a resource facilitator, if you are doing peer support, you are no longer a resource facilitator. You're a person doing peer support. And so that's where you have to learn to take off the hats and wear the right one when you're talking to doing peer support. So that was just my add-on to Chris.
Okay, great, thank you. And then, although on the maybe a little bit of a different side of this, agree with the resource comment. Our members are always looking out for resources to share with our members because the rehab folks sure don't give us any. So recognizing that when you are working with someone, whether a peer or a resource facilitator, there's going to be need to share what resources you're aware of. Chris, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it's what Sher just said, because as a resource facilitator myself, it is a struggle to define the difference, the line. And I mean, I'm always trying to figure it out, because I also agree with Kristen that peers offer resources. So maybe if smarter people than me can figure out, okay, what is the difference? Because it is hard to figure out which is doing peer and which is doing resource facilitation, you know?
Yep, excellent points for sure. Okay, you know, I'm gonna say, unless Jill, was there more that came in on the Jamboard?
No, there wasn't.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and take this down then.
Yeah, I think we are at the time where I just want to wrap us up so we get done on time. But I'm going to share my screen because I want to share the evaluation QR code, which now I just lost, so please bear with me. Okay, here we go. If you all, while we're wrapping up here, could take a minute to complete the evaluation that you'll see on your screen. If you have a smartphone, my phone's smarter than me, so that's my phone, but if you have a smartphone, you can put it on camera mode and put it up to the QR code and it will link you to the survey. Otherwise, the survey link is in the slides that you will receive again. And then just as a third option, we'll be following up, and in our email, we'll include the link as well. But if you have time right now or the ability to do the QR code, that might be the fastest way to get it done. I want to ask Carrie if you have any comments you'd like to close us out with before we shut down this meeting.
And Judy, as we transition there, there was just a request. Can you put the link in the chat for the Survey
Great
Monkey?
idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
Carrie.
Yeah, great, Jill and Judy, thank you very much. I'm a little overwhelmed with all of the great input. I was hoping for good input, but you never know when you host a meeting or have something like this, how people are feeling that day, whether they're, you know, feeling like being real chatty or not so chatty. But I'm just from the bottom of my heart appreciative of everyone bearing their souls and talking about what's important to them, and especially about what's important to them in terms of building a peer support model or program or whatever we can do here in Nebraska. So that's way more than I intended to say, but just thank you. I appreciate everybody coming today. And I think Nash is going to send me a report of all the proceedings that happened today, and we will be glad to share that publicly when that is done. So I think that's it from my end. Just thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And on behalf of Nash, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to facilitate this discussion. Someone had mentioned, I apologize, I'm not remembering who, but this is an opportunity nationally. I think it was Kristen who was talking about that. What we learned from you all are things that we can share with other states as they also look to do peer support. So we appreciate kind of the pioneering efforts that you're making here and your willingness to kind of help us think about this on a national level as well. So thank you all very much for your time, your input, your thoughtful responses to the questions. Know that Nash is here for you if you need anything at any other level. And I guess I didn't put my contact information on slides, but we will get that to you as well so that you know how to reach out to us. But any other last words? Jill, did you want to add anything before we wrap? Are we good?
No, just a appreciation for this opportunity to be a part of this. And it's going to be really exciting to see where things go in Nebraska with so many inspired people. We will share the contact information that was mentioned earlier along with the slides. So, you know, they're probably thinking of ways to coordinate or orchestrate any kind of outreach would be important, but we'll make sure that Carrie gets all of those resources and that the right training materials are distributed. This has been a great morning and hope everyone has a great weekend.
All right. Thank you. Everybody have a great weekend.